invite. Just getting back from lunch, so I will try to make this entertaining. But before I jump in, I do want to give you a little bit of a background on who I am for those of you that I haven't had a chance to meet yet. So my name is Jess Willis. I work for Pitney Bowes, and more specifically, I lead global product marketing for our data line of business. So usually you see the name Pitney Bowes. For those that recognize the name, we're recognized as a mailing company. So one of the unique challenges I have representing the data line of business is really starting to tell a different story. Why should people actually care about what we're doing from a data perspective, and what does that mean? I won't bore you with tons of details there, but I will tell you enough to give you the context of where we're going from a presentation perspective today. And with that knowledge and background and history specifically of where Pitney Bowes has spent the last century of getting packages and mail to its intended recipients, we've learned a lot about an address. We've validated addresses, billions of points, billions of data points, and now we're taking all of that unique knowledge and we're building this data portfolio that's really centered on that concept of location and what an address means. And not just the physical location itself, but all of the things that are relevant around it. For me as a product marketer, that means representing a portfolio of over 350 data products. And with those products, we're essentially extending the ability for companies to license that data for them to solve business problems, right? Someone said earlier, we're all in the business of helping people solve their problems, and truly that's what we're doing with the data. And I'm telling you all of this because 350 products is a lot to manage as a product manager. It's a lot to manage in kind of the startup function of our business with limited resources and limited support. But it's particularly relevant to this concept of content. And so that's where I want to jump in with you today and talk through just a problem that we were having, a problem that we needed to solve. To be really transparent with you, probably tell you more than I should about some of the pain points there and how we worked through solving that content issue, but most importantly, how we started getting our CEO and just the C-suite in general to really start recognizing the value of content in our marketing mix and how we did that, with the goal in 20 minutes or less to give you some things that you can be thinking about if it does happen that you are playing some role in content creation and building that strategy, which, as a quick show of hands, how many of you are somehow involved in content creation in your organization? Wow, that is very telling. Okay, the future is bright. There is a path forward. So let's jump right in with our problem. If we can get to it here. Everybody tells you content is king, right? In reality, though, this is a little bit more what it looks like. So it's constant chaos. How many can appreciate the fact that people all over your organization are creating content? Yeah, I know there is more than one of you that's raising your hand. I'll give that up to lunch. But truly, people from all over are creating content, and from a product marketing perspective, this is no different in a big organization like ours. Primarily around product content, the main players tend to be product marketing, product management, pre-sales. You have some folks now on the sales enablement side building this content. And so there's no shortage of things being created. There's no shortage of places that this information lives. But in reality, it's not always very different from the last time it was created, right? It's just some modification of something that already existed before. And so you can see in these, dark gray boxes, if you could make your way through the crazy arrows, that the types of things we're creating, not really all that new and exciting. It's the traditional things that sales, that partners, and that our other internal stakeholders are asking us for. Where do I find product content to put into my sales presentation? What's the most compelling use case that everybody needs to know about today, and how does the data map back to that? Where can I find product statistics, things that would be interesting to the people that I'm talking to? And so we had to come up with something that would allow them to have this single source of content. So about 2 years ago, when we started to stand up the line of business, we created something that we call the data guidebook, but really we could call FUD, right? It was something that the sales organizations could throw at someone and say, here is everything you need to know about our 350 data products, please buy today, right? Like just the one single repository of information they can go to. Now we all know as marketers, that's not the approach that we want to take, right? We want to customize that experience. We want to map, the specific product to the customer use case. But in reality, our sales organization needed a place to start. So this is what was created. The problem with it was a static PDF. It was over 200 pages. There were so many SMEs, product managers, product marketers involved in the creation and truly in the updates of this that it became really cumbersome. Still expensive. We were actually producing this. Our creative services couldn't take on the project at the time, so we had to outsource it. So the agency fees associated, not only with the creation, but with the regular updates of this got pretty overwhelming pretty quickly. And there was really low visibility into how people were using this. So the things we could tell were our sales organization was engaging with it. It's the single most downloaded sales asset in our company. We could tell that customers and prospects were engaging with it. We have a place where it lives that requires a single sign-on, where you can go and you can download this massive document and have this living on your desktop for all of time. The problem is the moment you download it, it becomes obsolete because with 350 products, as you can imagine, every time there's a release or update, this gets out of date very quickly. So we had some problems to solve. The model wasn't working. And when we looked at the actual impact on revenue, we just didn't have the visibility. At the time, we were working with a few different agencies on different types of interactive content, totally separate from this project. So we were taking big thought leadership assets, white papers, et cetera, and trying to find ways to use interactive to make those pieces of content more snackable. And when we took a step back from this project, we said, how can we start to incorporate those same ideas into something like this? And we looked at more of a scalable content infrastructure. And as a quick aside, in addition to solving this problem, we were also trying to solve a larger problem around content management as a whole and moving the company towards more of a component content management system and selling the need for that. So I'm giving you a very, isolated view of some of this project when in reality there were bigger discussions going on and stakeholders that we needed to involve in the continued investment in content. So whereas, traditionally if we were looking at this, you should never really look at your content isolated, but if we were, we probably wouldn't have taken it as far as we did in deconstructing the business case. But what we wanted to prove out was where was the actual impact on revenue? How could we, in creating something that was not only easy to update and easy to manage, something that was easy to scale, how could we also link it back to actual ROI? And this is where we started. So the things we knew right off the bat were our hard and soft costs associated with the creation of the piece. And these things, when you talk about them, they seem very obvious, but when you think about the content creation and more complex content projects, typically we're not diving as deeply into this. So how do you actually quantify these numbers in a way that are meaningful? We started with just headcount alone. So for us, I knew I had 12 product managers that were spending at least 8 hours of their time on this document alone. That took time away from what they should be doing with the sales team. They weren't developing products in that time. So I was very mindful of the fact that that dollar amount mattered to me, and it would very likely matter to my CEO. So that's the number we started with. How many hours, if we could give those hours back to the organization, how could we build that into our total ROI? The same thing, I knew my own number of hours that I was putting into the project, as well as the administrative support around it, and the actual cost of agency fees. So we could work backwards to figure out, again, if there was a cost savings there, what could we give the organization back? By building this in an interactive way, we knew we could take a 12-week project and streamline that into a 2-week production cycle. So again, we were able to multiply that difference and give that back to the business as a hard and soft cost savings. So it seems, again, it seems simple, right? But those numbers became very important in starting the conversations with our organization in a valuable way. Then we looked at things like our corporate objectives. So in the past, we were using this as a sales enablement tool, but in reality, we were building content around it. We were building new and exciting ways for people to interact with our data. So we were able to connect this to a very specific revenue amount. Our new website that we were standing up at the time, it was an e-commerce play. We wanted to move low-value transactional deals to essentially a marketplace. This would give us a path to do that, and I'll go into that a little bit later. So again, 20 minutes isn't enough to go into these details, but we had to get this granular. You're not going to see the numbers here, but this is a tool that for any of you interested, I'd be happy to share to walk through the methodology that we took to start to build out these metrics. We looked at everything from our current conversion rates to what we can modify from a digital standpoint to some of those hard costs that I mentioned earlier. We looked at how we could affect churn and our current renewal rates, et cetera. And we built that all into this spreadsheet so that when we did present a business case to our stakeholders, it looked something more like this. So we were using this concept of what we already knew about interactive content and how it performs better than static. We built that into the numbers and then actually used real numbers associated with our current goals to present them with something that they would understand. And by doing this, the narrative becomes not only something that you can believe in, but again, something that your stakeholders are geared to tune in and lean forward and listen to. After we presented that, we started talking about how interactive content would convert using the top of the funnel approach and then carrying that through to the sales cycle. So again, this is a tool that we've found very useful that will be available to you, and I'm happy to walk you through in more detail. But this shows what our strategy was going to be specifically, and all of the things we were already doing from an organic and paid perspective to actually take what was static before, make it interactive, and then drive to a more meaningful engagement with our customers and tie it back to our end goal of onboarding a new customer. And then here are some of the calculations that we actually came out with. So through this methodology, we were actually able to figure out what a reduction in sales cycle would look like. We took the average number of deals, factored in the conversion rate or the difference of conversion rate with interactive, and we were essentially able to have conversations with our sales leaderships to say, I hate slipped deals. It's one of the worst things if you're in sales to have a number of deals that slip over into the quarter. But what if we had content where we could not only prevent those, but carry those deals forward and give you more to close on in a calendar year? So by factoring that in, we were able to see a 20% reduction there where we could give that back to the business. Likewise, through ultimately fixing our conversion rates, we were able to showcase how much more traffic we can convert based on using interactive and then factoring that into a blended transaction rate that was relevant to our particular plan. So again, this is the type of content that I think could be, we were talking about this earlier, this type of deconstruction of a business case could be a day in and of itself. It's really clunky. It takes a lot of people at the table to start to figure out these metrics and the metrics that are meaningful for you. But what I was finding going through this process with our partners and our internal team was that everyone that was approaching us with a content idea was not doing this level of analysis. And rightly so, right? We don't have time usually to stop and to really, spend the amount of time it takes, I think, to do this meaningfully. And I admitted at the front end of the presentation, we probably wouldn't have done it if it didn't fit into this larger piece of the puzzle that we were trying to solve for. But going through this process, it became clear that in all of our experiences across the board, I don't think we get enough exposure to this type of content and ways to really build meaningful business cases for the people that we manage up to. And something as simple as thinking about the structure of this differently, getting buy-in from all of the stakeholders that were around the table. When product management saw that we were doing this level of analysis, they were thrilled to support it, because for them, we had just quantified exactly how much time their teams were spending on content. So now all of a sudden they had someone else carrying that voice where, in a given day, we don't have time to connect these dots. We don't have this opportunity to participate in everything that the sales team is telling us is meaningful for them. So it's really giving them that second platform to stand on and say, you know what, we need help and we need a way to automate these things to be more effective. We also were able to provide, and this was where we really leaned on our partner, who, working for a large enterprise, if someone is looking for the business, my approach is to make them part of that learning process, and in this case, they were alongside of us every step of the way. And part of that was actually building prototypes that once we got through the first end of the conversation, then there was something that was tangible that they could interact with. They could see a prototype and walk through where the functionality would be and how it would be different from what we were doing today. And so this is the example, from the static PDF that I mentioned earlier. We built this web interface. We built functionality in at the product detail level where you could actually go in, interact with a product. You could, on the left-hand side here you see, or my left, excuse me, there are assessments built in. So we have a number of products that are legacy that may be confused with some of our newer offerings. This allows us to ask questions, make sure people are in the right place, and then customize that experience for them. And all the while we're learning, we can take that information, and if someone doesn't follow the CTA, they could go into essentially that very targeted retargeting program where we can customize the content that they're being served on their journey, both from a product perspective and then thematically. So that could be, at the industry level, et cetera. We had the added benefit, again, of this content already existing and us just really rethinking our approach. So all of this, for us, our call to action leads to a very immersive experience where they can then go and interact with the data that I mentioned earlier. So they can see it on a map, they can download samples that they can ingest into their environment. So suddenly you're taking something that, essentially was a guidebook before, or a product brochure, and now you're making it a lot more interactive and meaningful for the user. And personalization, I like this quote a lot. This is from CMI, that personally relevant content for all of us, whether it's B2C, B2B, is very important. But what I think gets lost in the mix is this concept that personalization has to be your name, or it has to be the immediate location that you're standing, or a box that's filled on your behalf because there's some autofill function that's using content that was already derived from some action you took before. Interactivity of the content doesn't have to mean that, right? It could mean how we're building things in meaningful ways to actually drive that user forward to an action. And in this case, it's learning about what those preferences are and then building that into the methodology that we are taking to not only build this piece of content, but all the content that surrounds it, and then putting that back into our user journey. So I want to leave some time for questions. I've seen a few hands kind of go like this. So I will leave you with one thought, and then we can get into the meat of this. When you really start to get frustrated that people in general don't care about your content, just remember that there is very good reason for it. There is crappy content everywhere, and it is our job to make this more meaningful, help folks understand, but truly to build the business cases that help us move forward. So,
thank you, Jessica. Round of applause for Jessica, and then we'll take some questions. Hello.
That was a great presentation. I love that. One quick question. I was curious about the rollout with sales, kind of going from the more static data guidebook that you showed into this more, this amazing interactive experience. How did you guys kind of talk about that shift? 'Cause that's a pretty substantial shift.
It's pretty interesting. So we're still in it. We had to make them stakeholders on the front end of the project. So the wouldn't it be nices came very early in our process, and we tried to seed some of that, some of what we wanted to do into the things that hopefully they would repeat back to us that they wanted to see. Like, wouldn't it be nice if you didn't have to have this whole separate briefcase just to hold this like 200-page thing, right? So, I say that in jest, but truly having them as part of the editorial board, not just for this, but in general on the front end, really goes a long way. And then trying to put things in a universe around it, just like we do as marketers in general, so that they're reading something that's not coming from me, saying that, wow, it is actually valuable for me to be able to see what someone's doing with this. I didn't mention one of the things that we built in is the ability to actually live send from any page that you're looking. And I think I can show you what that looks like. So you can see if you're looking at this Street Pro page, you can directly send this to yourself that, it opens up the link for this. This actually, part of the methodology here was we didn't want to create product sheets anymore, individual product sheets for all 350 products. So we created this in a way that when you print screen it, it does truly look like a Pitney Bowes template, and it reduces even more. That was not built into our original calculation, but it is an additional value back to the business where now you have, you don't have that spin-off of activity on product-related content. And that's the kind of stuff it does take, shifting the way that sales is thinking about those resources. The selling point for that was, but wouldn't it be nice if you could tell when they opened it? They received it, they opened it, and then you could see if they interacted again with the guidebook. So, yeah.
Hi. So I'm a little bit in love because this is just amazing.
Awesome.
So that was great to see. So you're in a large established company. For those of us who are in smaller companies or startups, maybe even someone who is needing to stand up product marketing and content marketing from scratch, what are your thoughts on lessons learned from your experience that apply there?
Yeah, I'd say, so it's always so hard because I am in a large organization, but I'm in the group that definitely has that startup mentality, and in some respects, the startup budget. So leaning on developing relationships with and then leaning on the partners that we're working on has become really key. I had to be pretty vulnerable in the discussions I was having under NDA with the contractors that ultimately we were, selecting from, to first admit that we really had a problem and to let them see some of the ugly stuff, like that second slide, right? It was conversations like that really drove us forward, and they were just as much as a part of that editorial team as anyone else. And I actually feel bad, I haven't said who that is. We worked with Scribble Interactive, and Ion Interactive and Scribble Live on this project, and they were absolutely, and continue to be very strong partners in the mix. I have no affiliation with the organization, I was not paid to say that, but again, I think that's what the true partnership is about. That's the first piece, and then I think being open and flexible to what you may learn that you didn't think going in. So, as sort of the helm of the ship, I guess, just making sure that you yourself are adaptable to learning as you go and making those modifications.
Yeah, first off, also wanted to thank you. Similarly in love, it was
Awesome.
Really brought a lot of amazing things together, including how you transform something that already exists. I thought it was a great example. My question is really around, my company is relatively small. We have a relatively complex business, and I find myself in the position a lot of evaluating and comparing business cases to help our company decide which things to do and which not to do. And this is a very practical question, and I don't know how much you're willing and able to share, but on your slide, you talked about not just the operational efficiency that was very easy to quantify in terms of people's time, but you actually had a lot of really great statistics on the positive impact on sales and marketing of transitioning to this new model. Was like a 20% reduction in sales time and a 1% reduction in churn.
Yeah.
If you're able at all to talk about how you came up with those numbers and how you defended them.
Yes, for sure. And I'm glad you asked the question, because I should have made the point earlier that if you can't defend them, it's not the right presentation to give, right? Because the folks that will start to lean in will absolutely lean into those numbers. So with the sales cycle specifically, we were able to look at our average sales cycle for data is about 9 months. So we took that calculation specifically and then looked at our current conversion rates, what conversion rates of interactive content would be, and then kind of factored that into ultimately a reduction. And it's a little hard when I can't show you the numbers, but that's how we came up with the number itself. Now, likewise,
If I could push on that just tiny
Yeah.
bit, were you actually comparing interactive content that you were doing or sort of industry standard?
interactive by industry standards. However, we were also seeing some of that prove out with different types of interactive content we were doing. So, we looked at like the Content Marketing Institute to get industry benchmarks, and we used our numbers and what we're seeing, but those projects were still in their infancy, so we didn't want to rely too heavily on what we were just starting to do. So we really needed that backbone of what the industry was telling us and what we could expect there. Likewise, we had to really think through what our current sales cycle looks like, but then also essentially this new e-commerce platform that we stood up. So there was a lot that we didn't know there yet. Things that we did know is that when you're purchasing something online, regardless of what it is in a B2B setting, it's probably not going to go over the $10,000 mark if you're using a credit card to make that purchase. So we essentially took that number, without getting too geeky here, and we created a blended transaction rate based on how many people we knew were visiting the site, and ultimately, scaled that to what the conversion rate should be, and then came up with those denominations to make sure that that fit essentially the model that we were building. So we did make a lot of assumptions, but we made those assumptions and rooted those in things that we already knew, and then we made sure that we could defend the logic behind the assumption. And I've had a few instances now where either our CEO or our CMO will call me direct on the way to present on what we're doing and say, like, let me just get up to speed on your logic again so I can make sure that we have it. And so it was really important for us to know how those numbers factored into the assumptions, how we could stand by them, and then how we would modify that. If something shifted and at what frequency do we come back to this plan? Because I think a lot of times you're sort of setting it and forgetting it, right? But because so much of this is new, we have to really hold ourselves accountable to coming back and, just logically looking at the decisions we made and how that's impacting future decisions as well. So, great questions.
Hi, I'm in the corner back here.
Hi.
So I just had a question on, so you're creating this content, it's interactive, it's giving customers a view into what you do and giving them a really good idea of that. We've done that a little bit, and we've had concerns within the organization of our competitors getting this great look into content. I was just wondering if you had run into those concerns and like how you put those teams at ease of putting that content out there when it's actually doing what it's supposed to.
Yeah, we have a lot of conversations around that, especially as we've made the data itself more available. Conversations about can they retrofit not just, retro engineer not just the content that we're producing, but truly the data. So that is always a hot topic internally. We definitely see when we're moving towards this type of shift in the way we market, we see folks wanting to emulate that. The cost of doing it becomes a little bit of a barrier for some folks. So, we have some major competitors, but then in pockets of our portfolio, are head-to-head with smaller competitors that may not be able to leverage the same kind of resources we can at the enterprise level. So that works in our favor sometimes as well. But we do have to watch it. I mean, even to the extent of who's registering for those sites and the number of downloads, and we have to really keep a close eye on it. And there's always room for improvement there to really be monitoring and trying to understand what people are doing with it. One thing that we've done to kind of get around it, at least from the way the data itself that we're exposing, we're only doing that in certain geographies. So that helps a lot. Having this be interactive too, we can start to collect more data on the users, and that ultimately feeds into that process of monitoring it as well. But it's a real concern. You have to have that built into your plan.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah, happy to
Thank
do
you,
it.
Jessica. Okay, so while they set up the chairs for the next panel, which I'll actually be hosting, I want us to take a selfie. So just stand up, stretch your legs, and squeeze in a little bit this way. We'll have our photographer come up here. Just for the internet tubes and stuff. Yeah, just like come in this way. Just come in a little closer. Yeah. Stretch your legs, smile. Okay, are we ready, Mark? Everybody smiling? No spinach in your teeth? Okay, smile on 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I think that's good. Okay, yeah, make your weird face on 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, great job, everybody. Thank you, Mark. 2 more mics, yeah. Just come up. Since I don't know any of you, I'm just gonna have you each introduce yourselves because I feel like that will just be way better. So yeah, just let's sit. Just name, title. Yeah.
Pass the mic.
Pass the mic.
Yeah.
Yep.
Get the most in there, so.
Yep. Okay, I'll use this mic too, and we'll make them in order. That can be 3. Left to right, 1, 2, 3, 4.
You're gonna pick that's muted and that's live, so I'll switch it.
Okay. I think he's gonna switch. Yeah. I'll tell people that we're kind of winging it. Yes, thank you so much, Jonathan. I know, yeah.